I'm glad you can make it today for the lesson coming from the book of Exodus, chapter 15. Where we are at this moment is right after the Israelites have left Egypt. They have escaped from Pharaoh, who sent his army after them after having let them go and then changing his mind. So the Israelites are pretty new to this freedom thing. They don't really know how this works because they've been slaves for hundreds of years. So everybody alive at this point has experienced being a slave. And we see that it takes a long time for them to get past that to the point where they can make decisions of their own, even though we see that one thing that is very strong in them is that they complain. Now, this is not new to the Israelites. This is something that people of all times have had a problem with, and it comes out with them because it's recorded for us. So here's an example of what was happening. The place where they were in was Sinai. That's a peninsula in between what is now Egypt and what is now Israel. There's a lot of desert in that area. So finding water is an important thing. There's not a lot of water there, and there are a lot of people who need this. So the people start grumbling to Moses about this because they see him as the leader. What they don't seem to realize, or they don't want to admit, is that they're actually grumbling against God, because God is the one who is leading them. Yes, they are following Moses, but Moses is getting his instructions from God. And then, of course, you may remember there's the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, at least for part of this time. So when Moses leads them someplace, he's doing it on the orders of God. And one of the things that results from this is that by complaining against Moses, they're complaining against God. And so he, being Moses, is trying to tell them, hey, this is the situation. You may think it's me, but we're really doing what God wants us to do. Now, God's part in all of this is to pass along the message that if you do what I tell you to do, then you won't have the problems that other peoples have, such as the Egyptians having a lot of diseases. You won't have that problem. And so God is trying to train people to trust him. Coming from a slave society, it's understandable that that would be difficult for them. But even so, it goes to the point where even Moses gets tired of it, and God starts losing his patience with the people. That's not where you want to be, on God's bad side, or God running out of patience for you. You don't want to test him that far. Well, the result of this is that they talk about being thirsty, and Moses, using God's instructions, is able to lead them to water. Or in one case in here, God has him go out and strike his staff upon a rock to produce water. Okay, and they're witnesses to this, so the people can't say, oh, Moses just happened to come across this. Another time they go out to a place where there's water, but the water is bitter. No one wants to drink it. Well, God has Moses take some wood and throw it into the water, and then the water's fine to drink. And some people get off on the wrong track trying to say, okay, there was something special about the wood. No, it's a matter of obeying God. He may ask you to do something silly to see if you will do it. The point is that we do what God wants us to do. So even if it seems silly to us, God has a reason for having us do certain things certain ways. Well, being out in the desert, water is important, but also food is important. And it's not like they can just find the food anywhere. So the people would have had some food left from what they brought with them out of Egypt. That wouldn't have lasted a long time. And they did have cattle. And it's kind of interesting when they complain about not having water uh, for themselves. They also complain about not having water for their animals. And you start thinking, wait a second, how did they get these animals? Well, they brought them with them out of Egypt, and they had animals because God had spared them. So this is a reminder that, wait, if you're complaining about what you don't have, look at what you do have and realize that from God's grace, you have what you do have. All right, moving on to the food part. This gets pretty interesting because the people are hungry and they're talking to Moses about it. Of course, they're complaining. And God says, I'm going to provide them with meat and bread. Now, one of the ways that people complained was that, oh, when we were in Egypt, we had pots of meat to eat and we could eat all we want. Of course, they fail to remember that they were also in slavery and being worked very hard to the point of exhaustion. And it's probably a little bit of a stretch to say that they had as much to eat as they wanted, because yes, they were blessed by God during that time, but the Egyptians, being their masters at this time, would not have been pleasant, and it's likely they would not have had as much food as they seem to remember having. Well, anyway, God sends in meat and bread to them. After telling them he's going to send them meat and bread, well, they can't imagine how it happens. Quail, which is a type of bird, flies in, and that provides them the meat. Now, the bread part is real interesting because he gives information ahead of time to Moses saying, this is how it's going to work. It's going to come down with the dew, and after the dew dries in the morning, they will see these flakes, and that is what they are to gather up, and they will have to eat. Well, the people see this, and they say, what is it? Well, their word for what is it is manhu, and it comes out being known as manna, and that's how we know it today. But when the name of that food comes out, you could really say, what is it? Because they don't know. They've never seen anything like it. They find that they can gather it up, and God has told them for each person, gather about half a gallon. So you think of a milk jug, and that gives you an idea of how much they're to gather. It's in flakes. They can boil it. They can bake it. And it's supposed to taste kind of like a bread with honey in it. So this is something sweet, and it's good for them, and they can live on just manna itself. So it's a good food source for them, but there are rules that go along with it. And these rules fall into kind of two categories. One is that you gather it up early in the day, because if you don't, it's going to eventually uh, evaporate away and not be there. So you need to get out and work to get it. But whatever you have at the end of the day that's left over, you throw it out. You don't keep it. Well, of course, people decide they're going to keep it. And when they do, in the morning, it is rotted and it gets fly larvae in it, which is called maggots, and you don't want to eat any of that stuff, and you don't want the smell in there. You see, God is trying to teach them to rely on Him day by day by day. They're not supposed to rely on Him once and then say, okay, God, we've got it from here. All right, so some of the people keep the manna to the next day, and they find out not a good idea. But the way the days of the week are set up, they are on a 7-day schedule. Of course, this has to do with God creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day resting. Well, God wants the Israelites to rest on the 7th day. So He says, on the 6th day, gather twice as much as you usually do, and then you'll be able to keep it to the 7th day and have it to eat on the 6th and the 7th day. Well, reason for that is they're not supposed to do anything on the 7th day. It's a day of rest. Well, some of the people are out looking for the manna on the 7th day. God's irritated with that, obviously. And Moses, of course, is irritated as well because the people just are not following God on this. But over time, we see that the people get into the routine. So these are the first steps for the people learning to rely on God. Now, unfortunately, with this generation of people, meaning all of the adults at this time, except for a very few, they do not learn this lesson in time, but their children do. And that gets us to the next part in all of this, is that God will work to provide for you and do what he can for you. You may not be able to do everything that God wants you to do, but what you can do what you can, and teach the children, teach the people who come after you to follow God. They will be able to go farther than you on this and may benefit in a way that you are not able to. Okay, with that, I'm going to finish this lesson. I want to show you the tie for today is a Coca-Cola tie, and it kind of combines the idea that the people were always needing water, so Coca-Cola being something to drink, and it combines that with the manna, which has a sweet taste to it. It's said to have tasted a little bit like honey was involved. Well, Coca-Cola doesn't have honey in it, but it is definitely sweet. All right, with that, I'm going to let you go, and I want you to have a good day and hope that you will be back soon. Bye.